Well, before we leave the Eagles and talk about your solo career, I was wondering if you could possibly comment on the rivalry you supposedly had with Steely Dan. In May of '76, they released The Royal Scam. One of the songs on the album featured the line, "Turn up the Eagles, the neighbors are listening." And then that December, you released Hotel California with the apparent response, "They stab it with their steely knives, but they just can't kill the beast." Some interpret these as friendly shout-outs and others as more mean-spirited disses. So what's your take on that?
I think they were friendly shout-outs, to tell you the truth. Fagan was one of the best writers and singers and producers in that era that we were making records, and it was a tip of the hat to them, and as well as a tip of the hat to us by them as well. So a lot of the same management company was involved with the two bands, and so, we were friends. There was very little rivalry. It was more of a tip of the hat or an acknowledgement on record. So.
Well, guys like you are out having your careers and focusing on that. Fans are left with like one album and then a year or two until they get the next one so they can dwell on these kind of things. And I think their interpretation, knowing you had the same management, that Steely Dan was a little jealous that you sold more records than them. And then conversely, it was like, oh, well, you can stab us with your steely knives, but, we're the big beast that outsells you. And that was one interpretation people had.
That's one of the first times I've heard that interpretation, because I've never really paid that much attention to it.
Who cares?
Thought that since they had put the Eagles in one of their songs, we would acknowledge them and note their acknowledgement and some lyrics back to them.
Well, that's why I brought it up, because it's actually not that important to me either, but I know that people listening have wondered about that, and I appreciate that clarification. Well, let's talk about your first big solo hit in 1981. It was based on an unfinished track from the Long Run sessions, and it had a pretty interesting working title, which was what?
Well, the working title, when we recorded it for the Long Run, or started out working on the Long Run on that song, was called "You're Really High, Aren't You?" And it was a song that I always thought was a little too heavy for the Eagles. Although Joe was in the band, I thought Joe and I could actually do some really great guitar stuff on it, and it had some dueling harmony parts on it around the solo section, and we just never really got to the point where we could finish it. It took just about everything we could to finish the Long Run record, and in the process, it nearly finished us.
Right.
So it was one of the tracks that was just left unattended, unfinished. And we were glad to get out of the studio after nearly 2 years and on the road. And
Now, did you actually have lyrics based on "You're Really High, Aren't You," or was that just
that was just a working title?
Yeah, it was just an instrumental at that point.
It was an instrumental at that point. And then when I was invited out to see the movie Heavy Metal, I saw the movie and I said, I've got this really great guitar track that I kind of submitted for the Long Run record, and maybe if I rewrote the tempo a little bit, use those guitar parts, I could rewrite the lyrics to go with this film. And that's basically what I did. I took that song structure, that song idea, and kind of twisted it into heavy metal.
You did the lead vocals on it, and I always wondered why you didn't do more lead vocals in the Eagles.
You'll have to ask Don Henley and Glenn Frey.
Enough said. Heavy metal. Well, listening to your guitar work at the end there, the harmony guitar parts, Tom Schultz from Boston and Brian May from Queen do that same type of thing, yet all three of you sort of sound distinctly different, to my ears anyways. Would you attribute that to guitar tone or technique or both?
I think 5 different guys can pick up and play the same guitar, and it'll sound different. It's the Indian, not the arrow, that makes that sound. It's the way your hands work. It's the way you phrase. It's the way you bend a string. The tone that comes out of the guitar in your hands is so different because there are so many different Les Pauls and Strats. Everybody plays the same instruments practically. But it's the Indian, not the arrow, to tell you the truth.
Well, now let's talk about your new album, Road to Forever. Obviously, the first thing I have to ask is, how difficult was it to work on an album without all that tension and drama and ego you were accustomed to? Was that a tough adjustment to make?
Actually, it was a very delightful adjustment to make. I included and invited people in to work on this record. It's either co-writers, lyricists, singers, Crosby, Stills, Nash, Tommy Shaw, Randy Jackson, Steve Lukather, people that I knew were just unbelievably gifted, talented musicians, but also really fun people to work with that I'd known personally, worked with in the past, had a great time around them. No tension, no drama, no arguing. Although I must say that when I had Crosby, Stills, and Nash come in to sing, I had Crosby, Nash come in one day and Stephen come in a different day because they have a little bit of strife amongst themselves when all three of them are in the same room together. They have their ups and downs, and I just didn't want it to be a down. So I just figured, okay, I'll do it this way, and it worked out very well.
We had their tour manager from Chris O'Dell.
Oh, yeah.
She's been on the show, and she wrote a great book, and she was our tour manager for the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young reunion tour, and her take was that Neil Young was just absent. He'd be at the gig, then he'd disappear, then you'd see him at the next gig. Graham Nash, she said, was a gentleman, awesome guy, not a word of complaint. Stills and Crosby, she said, were prima donnas. And
I don't know
her
about
take,
that.
So.
Everybody has their opinion.
But she worked for them, though. I mean, she was in a role where they were asking her to get a hotel room or different things, so it wasn't like she was in the band with them.
Right. No, I understand. I've known Stephen since we were 15 years old, so I think the world of him. I think he's a great guy, brilliantly talented guy, great sense of humor, great player, written some of the greatest songs in rock and roll history. And Crosby, the same thing. You have to salute who they are and what they've accomplished, and admire their talent, and not just judge by what somebody said about how they asked for a hotel room or something.
Right, and also have the wisdom to have them come to different sessions, like you.
Yes, that's right.
You still get the harmony blend.
That's right.
Well, I like the balance you struck on the album between mellow tracks and rockers. I think both sides of you are well represented. The first track I want to play is my favorite vocal performance by you on the entire album. It's a song called Over You. What can you tell us about the writing of that song?
Well, I wrote that right after I left the Eagles and got a divorce from my wife of 29 years. Yeah. And those things that happen to you that occupy a long part of your life, they really soak into the cellular fiber of your soul. You don't just cut those things off and walk away. And so that song was about carrying that feeling on probably for the rest of your life, because they were such a huge part of your life. And an earlier part of your life, and they'll probably remain there in some form or another until the day you're gone.
Well, I could tell it was about your wife of 29 years. Let's listen to that song. As I said, I really love the vocal performance on it. This is from the new Don Felder album, Road to Forever. It's called Over You.
I'm sitting outside your window tonight, having a drink with the moon. I was wondering if I treated you right, or just gave up too soon. And I was wondering if the last time we talked might be the last time. 'Cause I knew it when you turned and walked, you were no longer mine. It's gonna be a long time before I can think about it without breaking into tears. It's It's gonna be a long time before I can talk about it and get over all those years and over you. Over you. I'm not one to hold on to things, but I've held on to you in the hopes that some dream might bring something we could work through. Now I live in your memories and the kisses you gave. I'm not sure that I'll ever be something you feel the need to save. It's gonna be a long time before I can think about it without breaking into tears. It's gonna be a long time before I can talk about it and get over all those years. You're all over me in every thought, in everything that I do. I've learned so much from these lessons you've taught. The next time